and welcome to another episode of Surrendered Birth Stories. Birth stories, birth education, and the pursuit of surrendering it all to God. Let's get started. What would it be like to be fostering multiple children of different ages while growing your family biologically as well? Listen in today as we hear Kayla's stories of pregnancy, miscarriage, fostering, and her very quick births as she shares the amazing journey God has taken her and her husband on over the years as they've grown their family. Trusting the Lord is essential to this process, and I can't wait for you to hear how Kayla and Matthew did just that. Well, welcome to another episode of the Surrendered Birth Stories podcast. Today, I have my name twin, Kayla, on the podcast with me. Kayla, will you introduce yourself and tell us a little about you and your family?
Yes. Hi. My name is Kayla. I am a mom of 4, soon to be 5. I've had 3 of our babies biologically. We just adopted a little one with disabilities. And then we are expecting baby number 5, which will be my 4th bio kid, um, in within the month. So if I seem like I'm out of breath, it's because I am. But, yeah, so I'm a stay-at-home mom. I work from home too, running some businesses, and we're homeschooling, homesteading, the whole thing. We've got goats outside and ducks, so kids stay busy, and we're always having always have something to do.
That's awesome. Well, let's start with your first pregnancy. What was it like finding out you were pregnant for the first time? How did that journey begin?
Oh boy. It probably started while my husband and I were dating because I was sending him birth videos, um, like YouTube videos of I don't know if you've seen the woman giving birth in the creek. It's like
Uh-huh.
12-year-old video or something. But I was sending him videos. I was like, listen, this is what I want one day. And he's like, okay. He, of course, just getting back from like his second tour in Afghanistan. He's like, I've seen worse. And I'm like, all right. So he's not scared of the home birth situation. Um, and then I was also a doula before we ever had our own babies. And so I had a really good idea of a really good picture of what I wanted in birth and pregnancy and all of that good stuff. Um, so we started trying basically as soon as we got married. And 3 months into our marriage, we found out we were expecting our son, Easton. So it was very exciting. He was born 8 days before our first wedding anniversary.
Oh.
But, yeah, so that was our first pregnancy. I've always just wanted to be a mom, and, of course, I loved everything about birth, and so I was just really excited that it was finally my turn.
So, how did you go about choosing a care provider for that pregnancy and so what was your care like during that pregnancy?
I wanted a home birth. I had just moved to North Carolina about 6 months before. Yeah, I think about 6 months. I'd only been in North Carolina for a little bit. And of course, North Carolina has crazy home birth laws. And so finding a home birth midwife without like a circle of people to point me in the right direction was really difficult. And we were just married newlyweds and we were broke too. So I was going to go with what insurance would cover. And there was one midwife that served our area at the time, and I could never get a hold of her. So that was a little bit disappointing. But we decided to go with a birth center birth for our first because insurance would cover it and it was still midwifery care outside of a hospital, which I was excited about. But I had also broken my pelvis 3 years before we got married. And so I was like, I don't know how birth is going to go, like a physiological birth. I don't know if my pelvis is going to like re-break or something. So I wanted to still have as natural of a birth as possible with as least intervention as possible, but I also wanted to be, we ended up birthing at a birth center that was like 8 minutes from UNC hospital. And so I was like, I know I'll be in good hands if we do have to transfer, if there is an emergency or anything like that. And I had attended births as a doula at UNC. And they had really good food. And so I told my husband, I was like, worst case scenario, we have to transfer. They have really great quesadillas at UNC hospitals. So yeah, so we ended up having a birth center birth with him, and it was a whirlwind. It was crazy. Everything happened a lot faster than we anticipated. And of course, as a first time mom, usually everyone prepares you for this long labor. And so I was prepared. I was mentally prepared to like have a 12-hour labor. And we got to the birth center because my contractions were like 4 minutes apart. And we had an hour drive. So it was hard to tell when to leave the house and when to get there. But we got to the birth center and they checked me and I was still contracting hard. I just spent an hour in the truck and it was miserable. And they checked me and I was only 3 to 4 centimeters. So they wanted to send me home. And I was like, I don't want to get back in the car. I don't want to make that drive again.
Mm-mm.
They're like, no, you're not even in active labor. And this was about 9 o'clock at night. They're like, you're probably not going to have your baby tonight. And I was like, well, we're not going to go home. That's a long drive. And I like can't sit still in the car. It's driving me crazy. So they're like, well, maybe you can get a hotel nearby. And I'm like, we're broke newlyweds. And we're like, no, that's not an option either. And they're like, okay, well, no one else is in labor right now. All the rooms are open, so you guys can stay the night. And I remember they gave me like a tincture to help me relax and help me sleep. And I laid down for one contraction with a peanut ball. And I was like, nope, this is not gonna work. I cannot lay down. I have to be upright. And so I sent everybody to bed. My husband and my mom were with me. And I told them, I remember like specifically saying, you guys go to sleep because I'm really going to need you in the morning because I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight. And I'm probably going to be really tired. I'm going to need your support in the morning. And so I sent everybody to bed. My doula was with me. We did have a doula, Sarah Carter, and she was fantastic because I didn't want any of the snacks that I had packed, of course. And so she went out to Harris Teeter at like 10 o'clock at night in Chapel Hill and went and got me some saltine crackers and peanut butter or something like that. And so I just got in the shower, sitting on a birth ball in the shower and with the water on my back because I had back contractions and back labor. And she got back from getting my snacks and I was like, I need to get out of here and use the bathroom. And of course, I sit on the toilet and start pushing. And I'm like, oh, and Sarah, I remember Sarah was right outside the door. And I said, Sarah, I feel like I'm like trying to push. And she's like, you sound like you're trying to push. I was like, okay. The midwives had gone upstairs and gone to sleep for the night because I was quote unquote not having a baby that night.
Right.
And there was a nurse like down on the floor with us that was just sitting at her desk. And so Sarah went and got the nurse. She's like, okay, well, I can check you. So we woke up my husband who was laying on the little bed so I could lay down on it and get checked. And I was 10 centimeters and crowning. And
Wait, and what time was that?
So this was at midnight.
Okay.
So it had been like 3 hours,
3
since we got there.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was sometime around midnight. So she turned on the water in the tub because I wanted a water birth. And of course I hadn't got to labor in the water at all. So she turned on the water and she ran upstairs to go get the midwives. And I stood up and Sarah helped me into the tub. As soon as I stood up, my water broke all over the floor. I'm like, man, that could made a mess right before I got in the tub. My husband, bless his heart, was like still rubbing his eyes. And we're like, she's pushing. It's time for the baby. And he'd only been asleep for like an hour and a half. And he's like, what? What is happening? We went and woke up someone went and woke up my mom. I think Sarah did. But by the time the midwives entered the room, I had already birthed his head. The water was still running and his head was out. And then he like made his little rotation and we pulled him out to my chest. He didn't even know that he had been born. Like he was asleep. And I was
Hmm.
like, "Is he okay?" And they're like, "Yeah, he's just sleeping." And, I remember the midwife, like, stuck her pinky in like, she had a glove on, and she stuck her pinky in his mouth, and he started sucking, and that's when he took his first breath. Um, but yeah, everything happened so fast. He was born at 12:33, right after midnight.
Wow.
And my midwives were the 2 midwives that were there, they're like, "We've never seen a first-time mom progress so quickly without, like, Pitocin or some sort of induction."
Yeah.
And they're like, "You need to probably plan home births for the rest of your babies because you could have very well had him on the side of the highway if we would have sent you home." And I was
Yeah.
like, "Yeah." So that was really it was really a whirlwind, and my husband like, the pictures, he's still, like, rubbing his eyes, like, not even awake. We were all just kind of in shock, and it took me a while to process the whole birth because I expected this big, long thing. We had, like, our cameras and our GoPro packed, and we had, like, everything, like, the tennis balls in the stockings for him to rub on my back. We did, like, the birthing classes so he could learn all the techniques to support me through labor, and I sent him to bed, and he slept through it all. And so it took a while to process that one.
I've had one fast labor like that. Was it super, super intense, especially now that you've had other babies to compare it to?
Um,
Or because sometimes when they're compacted like that and you dilate so fast, it can feel extra
yeah,
intense.
so I think my other ones have been about the same. My labors with my girls have been shorter overall.
Wow.
Um, I just yeah, so it's always really intense and quick for me, but now I can, like, kind of wrap my head around it.
Yeah.
Because as a first-time mom, I just remember, like, there were weeks that I was just alone home alone with my baby, and every time I would close my eyes or, like, have a quiet moment, I was, like, replaying everything that happened at his birth because I was like, "How did that" like, I needed someone to, like, debrief me on what just happened because it was so quickly, but, so I labored at home with him until our contractions were, like, 4 minutes apart, and so from the first contraction to baby in my arms with him was 8 hours total, but I only spent 2 hours in active labor.
Wow.
Um, and then my girls have been from the first contraction to baby in arms have been 6 hours and 4 hours.
Wow.
And so I'm gearing up this time. I'm like, "Okay,
You're
we only
gearing
got
up.
2 hours. If
Right.
everything stays on this trajectory, we might only have 2 hours this time around." So, but
Wow.
yeah, it was wild, and the midwives were, I think, just as shocked as I was because, they specifically told me, "You're not having a baby tonight. You can go home." And I was like, "I can't go home like this. You can't send me home." I think I knew how intense it was. And especially when I tried to lay down or when I tried to get in different positions or tried to rest like they told me to. And I remember we tried a TENS unit at one point too, but it was just too much for me because my back, all my contractions were already in my back. And then we put a TENS unit on there and I had a contraction. I was like, "Get this thing off. I can't do it." But yeah, it was a whirlwind. He came out, he was bruised. His little cheekbones were bruised, and I mean, when he was first born, his whole face was, like, purple, and they're like, "It'll pink up in a few hours," and it did, but then he still had, like, bruises on his cheekbones, and he had, burst blood vessels in his eyes
How
from
big
kind
was he?
he was 8 pounds, 13 ounces,
Hmm, good size.
so a good sized little baby. Um, he just can't entered the world just fast and furious. So, with my girls, we planned home births, and I was put in touch over the years with an awesome home birth midwife, and so we've been having home births with her ever since, and that has been a beautiful, beautiful experience, and now I can't imagine ever leaving the house when I'm in labor.
Once a home birther, always a home
Yeah,
birther.
I'm like, I don't ever wanna do it any other way. I just wanna stay home.
So, what was your postpartum like with your first?
It was rough. I was really scared I was gonna get postpartum depression because all the women in my family seem to have had postpartum depression, and so I think I was, like, hyper aware. of all of that. And my husband just would remind me, he's like, you don't have to, if you pray that the Lord will take that away, that won't be part of your issue. And so we prayed really hard that I would be okay. But it was also very isolating, because I didn't know anybody. I didn't have a good community of people here. I didn't really have friends. Like I hadn't gone out and met people because I moved here and we got married and then we got pregnant. And at the time we had two vehicles, but one was broken down. And so my husband was driving our truck to work and I was just stuck at home with the baby all day long. And so it was very isolating, but I also was learning everything about motherhood and learning, what kind of mom I was and what kind of baby my baby was. We were getting to know each other, and so it was also a really beautiful, beautiful time. And I had a mom at church. I remember I called her. Let me think. Easton was born on a Sunday, so he was a week old on his first church service. And I called her the Saturday night before church, and I was like, "Okay, what do I do if I have to take him to the nursery?" She's like, "You just go to the nursery." And I was like, "Okay, but do I have to, like, lock the door if I'm breastfeeding, or do I turn the chair around so no one walks in?" Like, I was like, "What do I do?" Like, I had all this anxiety about just what I was going to do with my baby at church. And she was just like, "Kayla, God gave you this baby. This is your baby. He gave you this baby because you're the one that knows what to do for him. And you're the one who can make the best decisions for him." And I was like, "Are you sure?" She was like, "Yes, I'm sure." And so I just like have replayed that in my head so many times over the years because there's so many moments in parenting when you're like, I don't know if I'm doing this right or what I'm going to do or how I'm going to do this. And it's just such a good reminder that, this is your baby that God gave you for a reason. He didn't give someone else your baby. He gave your baby to
Right.
you.
Amen.
Yeah. So that has just been something that has really stuck with me through all of my mothering. And I've told other moms the same thing when they're going through like the hard postpartum stuff and all of it. But um that just really like changed a lot for me and changed postpartum for me, I think too, because then I was more confident in my decisions. I was more confident in, being the only one in my family or in my circle that was breastfeeding and baby wearing and naturally birthing and you know
All the things.
I didn't need anybody else's confirmation because this was my baby that the Lord gave me and I knew what to do with him.
Oh.
Even when I didn't know what to do with him. The
Great.
Lord gave me what I needed. So, yeah, that was really great.
That's awesome. Okay, so we know you had more babies. So what happened between babies 1 and 2? What was that journey like? Was it a planned thing? Was it a surprise? Or how did that all go down?
So, I just am in a constant state of baby fever. There's never a time where I don't want another baby, and I think my husband is on the same page with that. So, we're always trying. We're always up for whatever the Lord allows to happen. But I got my cycle back after our son was born when around like 5 months, when he was 5 months old. And I was like, "Okay, well, if we get pregnant now, then we'll have like 2 under 2, they'll be close and they'll be, it'll be fun."
Oh, yeah.
Maybe I'm crazy, but it'll be fun. Um, and so we were just up for whatever the Lord had for us. And I never like my cycle was really irregular and I never was pregnant. I took probably 200 pregnancy tests during that time.
Wow.
And it was like serially taking pregnancy tests. Um, we got pregnant, let me think. We got pregnant that fall when he was 1. He was like 1.5, I think. We got pregnant finally after so many months of trying, and then we had a miscarriage, and so that was really hard. That was something that, we hadn't had to walk through yet before, and it was just discouraging because I was like, "Well, I want another baby so bad, and I want him to be close in age," and then he was already 1.5, and we were like, "This is a good time," we'd already announced it at church and everything. And and then we miscarried. And so there was a lot of like kind of wrestling with God about about what is happening, why are we not having another baby yet. And I remember one day I had gotten Easton to sleep, and of course he nursed this entire time. He nursed until he was almost 3, and I could not get him to sleep without nursing. So I was laying in bed nursing him, and he was falling asleep for his nap, and I was like half asleep, half awake, and I was just kind of praying. You ever like fall asleep praying?
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like in prayer. Like, he was almost 2 years old at this point. It was right around his second birthday. And I was like, Lord, why have we not gotten, like, why don't we have another child now? Like, why has this not happened for us? Why am I still not pregnant? And I just very clearly heard in my heart the Lord just say, I've given you another child, bring her home. And I was like, what? Bring her or him, or I've given you another child, bring it home. And I was like, what? And so, and we'd always talked about like fostering and doing foster care or adopting. But it was something like, we'll do that after we're done having our own kids. That was kind of our consensus that we'd come to. And we were living like in a small single wide trailer at the time. And I was like, we can't even get licensed to foster. We have a 2-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 2-bath. But I told my husband about like what I'd been praying about and what I had heard. And he was like, okay. He's like, well, let's see about fostering. And I was like, what? And he's
Wow.
like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. And so we went to like an informational meeting and started the ball rolling to get licensed for foster care. And it turns out you can get licensed if you're in a single wide trailer.
Look at that.
Yeah, it was like a very specific, it would have been really specific as to what kind of placement we could take, because they had to be around the same age as our son to share a room with him. But we were hoping just to have someone younger than him so he would stay the oldest. And so we started the whole process of foster care, and our heart really changed through all of that, because of course at the first meeting, we're thinking we're going to go get a baby, like we're going to foster and get a baby and adopt a baby. And the first meeting we went to, the first training we were at, is like there was a quote on our name tags that said, foster care isn't about finding a baby for your family, it's about being a family for a child. And I was like, oh, shoot. Like the Lord just really convicted me there. Like, okay, that was really selfish of me going into fostering, thinking that this is just going to be a baby for our family. And so the Lord really softened our hearts for foster care and changed our perspective a lot. And as we were going through our licensing process, of course, I think we had a week left of classes. We found out we were pregnant with Everly. And so we're like, okay, Lord, like it was just really a confirmation, like, God wanted us to go through this and have this change of heart and get these steps in place before we were ready to continue adding on to our family. So we got licensed while I was pregnant with Everly, and we ended up not having a placement until Everly was close to her first birthday. But we got our whole license set up and did respite care for a few kids, just like short-term weekend stays while their foster parents had a break. But then we were on to our second pregnancy.
Wow. So that's got to be different, fostering while you're pregnant and
Yeah.
not knowing at any point you could have another baby. Like,
Yeah. It was funny because once our license came through, I like kept my ringer volume all the way turned up, because I was like, I have to answer the phone if it rings. Someone's gonna call me and they're gonna have a baby. And it never rang. Or it did ring, and then we would say yes to whoever the child was. And then that county would place the child with someone closer to them, or the child would end up going with kinship, or the child wouldn't end up coming into custody. And so there was probably like 8 circumstances where we got a call and we said yes. And then it just never came to be, like the child went somewhere else. Um, so that was a big lesson too in trusting the Lord because we're like, okay, we did this big thing and we got our license and we're ready and what's going on. But we've always prayed whenever we get a call about a child, we've always just prayed like, Lord, please have your hand on this child's life and take this child where you need them to go, where with the family you want them to be with. And if it's us, please give us the grace to handle it.
Mm.
And so that's just always been our prayer every time we say yes. And for the first like 8 times, it was a no. And I'm like, okay. But yeah, so that led into our pregnancy with Everly and our planning our first home birth. It was a crazy, exciting time.
Okay, so you now have a home birth midwife and you're in your second pregnancy and everything goes smoothly. Were there any like pregnancy bumps along the road or was it like a
Oh, yes.
pretty smooth pregnancy?
I forgot to mention this part of my first pregnancy, but I have had hyperemesis gravidarum with all of my babies. So
Mm.
I am just sick as a dog the entire time, like all the way up to 40 weeks, requiring like some sort of medication or some sort of intervention to help me not throw up constantly.
Ugh.
um, and it's been worse with each of my pregnancies. So with Easton, I was able to manage with like over the counter stuff. And with Everly, it was worse. And so we had to find different medications. And that's kind of been the trajectory with them all. Like what worked last time doesn't work this time. And so that's been rough. But I also had going into Everly's pregnancy, I felt really confident in the birthing part. I was like, okay, pregnancy is really hard. Me and pregnancy don't get along very well. I'm pretty miserable, but the birthing and labor part, like, I can do this. We got this. And that's like, you can't have, I don't know, maybe you can't have an easy pregnancy and an easy birth.
I bet there's somebody out there who has, but I feel you. I'm just like you. I have miserable pregnancies and then I really enjoy the actual birth part.
Yep. So I was super confident going into Everly's labor because we had our home birth midwife and um my husband was on board for a home birth and we were finding space in our little single wide trailer to to set up a giant birth pool. But so Everly was born right before Easton's 3rd birthday. And so he was the only child for 3 years. And so that was an adjustment for sure. But labor started with Everly at 6 o'clock in the morning, like on the dot. I was laying in bed and like was woken up by a contraction. And then like 7 or 8 minutes later, woken up by another one. And I was like, okay. And then I kept contracting, and my husband was up getting ready for work, and he worked about 45 minutes away from home. And so I was like, I don't know if you should go in or not. And he's like, well, I'll go in. And if anything changes or speeds up, then just call me. And he was maybe 20 minutes up the road and my water broke. And I was like, okay, you need to turn around and come home.
Thank God for cell phones.
Yeah. Yes. Can you imagine? Man, it was a different time before cell phones for sure. Yeah, so he came home, my midwife came, and at that point, labor was really intense. I had back labor again, and this is like a side note. I am convinced that the position of your uterus plays a factor in whether or not you have back labor.
I concur.
Okay. Because I had asked, like, when I was pregnant with my first, I asked her, I was like, "Okay, so all the women in my family have had back labor and we all have our period cramps in our back. So does that mean I'll have back labor too?" She's like, "No, you only have back labor if your baby's posterior." And I was like,
Not
"Okay."
true. Your baby also can just have a giant head and that will give
Yeah.
you back labor too.
Yeah. So then I had back labor with Easton and he was not posterior. He was LOA, like perfect position. And then of course with Everly, I had back labor again. And so as soon as my contraction started, I knew I'm like, okay, this is it. But Everly was posterior.
Mm.
And so my back labor was a lot worse. My labor with Everly was not a glamorous labor because she was posterior. She had me running to the bathroom a lot. And it was like, as she was descending, it was just clearing out my whole system. And so I spent a lot of her labor on the toilet, and my husband spent the whole labor trying to get the pool filled. And we kept like running out of hot water, and it wasn't full enough, or the top ring was like starting to deflate, or something. There was like technical issues with the pool. And with my first, the water was still running. And so this seems to be like a common theme in all my births that something's going on with the pool. So I remember I was sitting on the toilet and I had started pushing, and I was like, no, I'm not going to have my baby in the bathroom. This bathroom's way too small. And my midwife cracked me up. She's like, I really want to give you your privacy while you're using the bathroom, but it also sounds like you're about to have your baby. So I want to stay close. And I was like, I'm just trying to poop. I'm not pushing. And I was definitely pushing in hindsight. Um, but so the pool was ready. And they're like, okay, so after this next contraction, you can get in the pool. And I remember saying, okay, after this one, I'm diving in. Like I'm running out there in the living room and I'm going to dive into the pool. And then my midwife cracked another joke. She's like, it actually says no diving on the side of the pool. So
So please don't do that.
please don't dive in. And I was like, okay, very funny. Um, so I did. I like finished that contraction and got into the pool as quickly as a 40-week pregnant person can get into a pool. And I only spent, I cannot remember. I want to say I spent less than 6 or 7 minutes in the pool and she was born. At this point, I still have not labored in the water. Like my goal is just to get into the water so I can have some relief and some time to labor. But it seems like I just jump in the water and push my babies out. But yeah, so that's when we realized that she was posterior. I didn't have any cervical checks at all with her. And that was really nice too, coming from a more medical model of care with the birth center, because they did checks, they offered them all the time. And my midwife, she didn't see a need for one. And I was like, I don't really want one because it really messed with my head last time, because they told me I wasn't in active labor and then I had a baby 2 hours later.
Right.
And so I was really happy to not have any, but then that's how we learned that she was posterior. So she came out sunny side up, and she was not bruised. She was a lot smaller than my son was. She was longer than him, but she was 7 pounds, 11 ounces. So almost a whole pound, a little over a whole pound smaller. And she was all pink. And I was like, oh, she's not bruised or have burst blood vessels in her eyes. She's so pretty. Yeah. So that was our home birth. And I just remember my best friend, I called her or texted her and she's like, congratulations, what can I bring you? And I was like, well, it turns out I don't have any of my adult diapers here that I thought I did. And so she went to the store and got me adult diapers, and then she got me a burger and a shake from Cookout
Oh, what a good friend.
and brought them to the house. And I was like, it was just a totally different experience having your baby at home and having like a good circle of people to call on when you need someone to run and get diapers for you. And so she came to the rescue there, and I got my burger and my fries, and my midwife and our birth team cleaned everything up and made sure I had a meal to eat, and they just left. And my husband's like, we were just looking at each other, and he's like, we didn't even leave the house and now there's another baby here. Like, that is wild. Like, he's like, that's really cool. I'm like, it is really cool. Like, we didn't have to, drive home or load up a car seat or do any of that. And then we just had our baby at home. And it was like kind of mind boggling for us as our first home birth. But now he'll tell anybody, he's like, it's the best thing ever. He's like, you don't have to pack it. You don't have to pack a bag. You don't have to get a babysitter. You don't have to. He's like, you just have your baby at home. And Easton, it worked out really well because he was just under 3. He had fallen asleep for an early nap, and he slept through my whole labor and woke up right before we cut the cord.
Aw.
And so he woke up and Daddy brought him out, and I was still in the pool with the baby, and we were getting ready to cut the cord, and so he got to see the after part of everything after all the noise making and pushing and delivery. He got to see the pretty parts when when there's a cute baby involved, and he did really great with that. And then for our next one, he was, like, super involved, and that's been my favorite part of home birthing is having the kids there to witness it all and see it all, but he slept through that first one.
So so your postpartum with your first one was harder because of the isolation aspect and not knowing anybody yet. But how did, now that you were like more established and had lived there longer, how did your postpartum go the second time around?
It was a lot better. With my f with my first also, my mom had flown in before he was born, and then she was on like, I didn't go into labor right away, so she only had 2 days left of her trip when he was born, and so I
Mm,
didn't have that help that I thought I would have postpartum, but this time around with Everly, she actually had her flight booked for the next day, and so she missed the birth, but she was there for a whole week with us after she was born. So I had that help, especially with Easton and introducing siblings and all of that good stuff. And then my husband took time off too, so it was a lot. I had a lot more support, a lot more help at home, and I was a lot more confident in my mothering. So it the biggest transition with between 1 and 2 was just getting our son, who had been an only child for 3 years, used to having a sibling and sharing attention. Um,
yes.
but thankfully, he's always, like, loved babies, and so he did really well with it. As good as we could have hoped, but it's still a big transition.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I feel like whenever I have one, the one right before who is no longer the baby, they just have an urge to hit them. Like,
Yes.
I don't know what that is about, but it's
Even
just,
even when it's lovingly, like, they just are a little bit aggressive.
oh yeah. My husband and I were just talking last night. We said, "Wow, our fourth baby never got pulled out of the baby swing and dropped onto the floor
Yeah.
like our first and second and third did." Because, well, actually, no, our first didn't because there was no sibling to do
No
that to
older
her.
sibling.
But the other 2, it was sort of like they were making a tradition of it. They were like, "That's just what you do. You pull them out of their baby swing and drop them on the floor."
Yep.
And we were like, "Wow, our fourth one got away clean. He never had that happen to
Yeah.
him."
My kids, it's been, like, they wanna hold the baby, and so you prop them all up and get them all prepared on the couch to hold the baby, and then they hold the baby for, like, 25 seconds or less, and
And
then
they toss them.
they just wanna toss the baby and go do
Mhm.
something else, and it's like, "Okay,
Mhm.
so we have to be on standby to catch the
Yes.
baby."
Yes.
Yeah, it's always a blast. Siblings are fun, but I'm confident that God made Easton to be a big brother, and so he's
Yeah,
just
because he's about to have now
4 little sisters.
4 little sisters,
Mhm.
right. Well, we'll see what happens here. My oldest is a girl, and she currently has 3 little brothers, but
Mhm.
we're about to see if she's about to have a 4th little brother
Yes.
or sister. We don't know the gender, so we'll but chances are it's a brother,
It
but we'll
Yep.
see.
That's what we found out with this so we didn't find out with Easton, the gender, and then with the girls, with Everly and Allie, I found out, but I didn't tell my husband because he didn't wanna know. He said, "If you find out, don't tell me."
Oh, wow, that's a hard secret to keep. That's
So
hard
I'm
not to slip up.
and well, I think we had good experience from not knowing with Easton, so I got used to saying baby or he or she or it,
Mhm.
um, and not, like, calling the baby a boy or a girl,
Yeah.
um, and so I had good experience there, and I didn't tell other people that I knew either because then, like, the pressure's on to not spill the beans,
Right.
um, but this time around, I found out I told him, I was like, "I have to find out because Easton's praying for a brother, and if he doesn't get a brother, he needs some time to adjust
Mhm.
and come to terms with that before before,
Yeah.
baby's in arms," and he's like, "Not another sister."
Mm.
And he took
Yes.
it he took it really well, and he actually kept the secret for probably, like, 4 or 5 weeks. So I found
Wow.
out, and I told him, and I was like, "We can't tell anybody, we can't let anybody know that we know." And so whenever someone would guess, like, "Oh, it's another girl, isn't it?" He's like, "I don't know, it could be a boy."
What a good sport.
But he took it really well. His response was just, well, I guess we're gonna have to keep having keep having babies until God gives me a brother. And I'm
Mm.
like, okay, buddy, go tell your daddy.
Right, I'm pretty sure that's what my daughter thinks as well, to keep having babies until she gets a sister.
We were just talking about it at dinner tonight, and he's been really good about, we already have the baby's name picked out and he's calling her by her name. And he's like, what if when she's born, she's actually a boy? And I'll be like, woo, my prayers were answered. Like my wish came true. And we're like, buddy, we're pretty sure she's a girl. Like
Just so
I'm
you
like,
know.
it could happen, but like we're pretty positive. Like we did the blood test and the ultrasound and everything. Like
Right.
um yeah, so it's sweet, but he is such a good big brother. So that really helps. And I feel like from 0 to 1 baby and 1 baby to 2 baby, that's been the hardest transitions for
Mhm.
us. Like those are the hardest postpartum periods, and then just big like life change.
Yeah.
But I feel like after that, like having baby number 3 and then bringing home baby number 4, and now we're about to have number 5, and it's like it just kind of gets easier
Mhm.
each time to introduce a new baby to the family.
Mhm.
Which it doesn't sound like it would get easier because you're like, "Yeah, I have 5 I have 5 kids."
Right. No, I agree. I think, our 3rd was the easiest transition, having our 3rd, and then our 4th. Yeah. It helps that the other ones are older. So it's not like you're having, like,
They're all
quints,
newborns at the
like, or
time.
quadruplets,
Mhm.
like, it's not like that. It's different. For me, the
Yep,
toddler is always the hardest part. Like, whoever the one right above the baby is always seems to be
yep. That's
the
the biggest
tricky the
transition.
tricky wild card, um, but other than that, yeah.
Yeah, between our 3rd and our 4th, our 3rd and our 4th are only 7 months apart because our 4th is adopted. Um, and so Allie was 8 months old and Hope was a month old or something like that when we brought her home. And so that was like one of our easiest transitions too though, because it was like she was too little still to even be jealous.
Right.
And so it was just like, this is my baby.
Yeah.
I'm a baby and here's my other baby.
Yeah.
So it was sweet.
Alright, let's talk about Allie then. So, you had already had Everly, and you were still in the foster, like,
Yes.
life.
So let's see, Everly was a year old. She okay. She was almost a year old when we finally got our first foster placement, and it was against all of our plans and ideas that we had in our heads. It was a 16-year-old.
Oh. Oh.
Yeah, so we started fostering a teenager. And she had been with us. She came right before Valentine's Day, and Everly's birthday is March 4th. And so Everly was almost a year old, and we finally got our first foster placement after saying yes to so many kids and them never coming to our house. We said yes to Riley, and she was in our driveway in 30 minutes.
Wow.
And so I was like, I don't know what to do with a teenager. This is not what we had planned. Like we had planned to keep our birth order um, intact and only foster babies or under 2 years old because that's how old Easton was when we got our license. And yeah, it was a whirlwind. We actually ended up getting guardianship of Riley when she was 17, and she just turned 20 last month.
Wow, so you guys still in relationship with her?
Yes, yeah. She moved out when she was a big kid.
When
Um,
she was 18?
yeah, she's like, "I'm out of here." But we're still really close. She actually was just texting me yesterday. She's like, "Mama, I
Aw.
have a weird question." I'm like, "Oh boy, here we go."
Aw.
But yeah, she's doing really good. But it was really interesting. I remember that first night. I took her to Walmart and we went and picked out sheets and a bed set for her bed and all that, and made sure she had all of our toiletry items, all the things. And I remember saying like, I don't know how to parent a teenager. My kids are all toddlers and I've never parented a teenager before, so you have to give us grace because we don't know what we're doing. And she responded, she's like, well, I've never had a mama before, so I don't know how to act with a mama. And I was like,
Oh.
okay. She was raised by her dad. And so I was like, okay.
Okay, so we're both gonna be new at this. Okay.
We're both new at this. We're gonna learn this together. Um, but yeah, so we got Riley and things were going good. And then 3 or 4 months after Riley came to us, we started fostering twin 3-year-olds.
Oh, so you had more than one at once.
Yes. Oh boy. So at that point, we had Easton and Everly, and then Riley and 2 twins, twin toddlers who were right in between Easton and Everly's age. And the competition was fierce.
I bet.
And the twins, bless them, they came from a lot of trauma and had basically been fending for themselves since they were born.
Oh,
So it was just a lot of behaviors, a lot of relearning things, a lot of just struggle for everybody involved.
yeah.
And then we were in the process of, it wasn't a long-term placement with the twins. We were their first placement, and then they were hoping to settle them in somewhere, or I think they had family in Virginia that was trying to get licensed so they could take them. So it was never like a long-term plan thing with the twins. But Riley started having really bad anxiety when we got the twins, and like panic attacks and, anxiety attacks and the whole thing. And so I was stressed out. Our teenager was stressed out. My husband was stressed out. And the kids were stressed out too because they were fighting with the twins all the time. And then we were just really at our like kind of our end of our rope, leaning into all the resources we had with our agency, which is fantastic. And we were just praying, like, Lord, show us what we need to do. Help us get through this time because this is really hard. We're dealing with things we've never seen from kids before. And then I got pregnant with Allie and I found out we were pregnant. And Matthew, my husband, he's like, well, there's our answer because you can't get through the first trimester at least of your sickness with your pregnancy on top of all of this. And so it was really bittersweet to find out we were pregnant because we were, of course, excited, always excited to be growing our family. But then it was a confirmation that we needed to disrupt the placement. And then we were on the hunt for a foster family to take our place for them. So they ended up going to a really sweet family just down the road. They were able to stay at their same daycare and it worked out pretty well. They actually were able to, I just found out this like a few months ago, actually, they were able to reunify with their birth family. And so they're not in foster care anymore and behaviors are better. They went through therapy and they're still doing that. And so, but yeah, so it was a really bittersweet time. And it was really a surprise to be pregnant so soon because it took us so long to conceive Everly after Easton. And Everly was 15 months old, 14 or 15 months old when we got pregnant with Allie. I don't know if my math is right here. I can't math on the fly here, but they're
Like a little over 2 years apart.
yeah, they're just under 2 years apart. So Allie was
Oh,
born a month before Everly's second birthday.
second birthday. Yeah.
So we got pregnant shortly after she turned 1.
Yeah.
And that was exciting because we still had a teenager. um, and it was fun to introduce this whole natural birthing world to our teenager because she had never, she just all she knew about birth was that you go to the hospital and you have your baby and it looks terrible in the movies.
And that's all most people know.
Yeah. And and so she learned a lot about pregnancy and birth and breastfeeding because I was still breastfeeding Everly. And so like right off the bat, I'm like, okay, so this is how I feed my baby. Don't be offended.
Hmm.
But yeah, so it was fun to share that journey with her. And then I was really sick again and got it pretty well managed with different medications this time. It's so crazy because I'm in my typical non-pregnant health. I don't take pharmaceutical and medication at all, like
Yeah.
natural remedies for everything. And then I get pregnant and I'm like, I cannot function or live like this. And so,
Hmm.
and so I like, you would think it'd be the opposite where I'm like, I can't take medication while I'm pregnant,
While
but
you're pregnant.
I
Right.
have to. I
We
just
have to
don't.
be able to take care of your family.
Yes, and it's so hard, but I'm so thankful at the end of the day that I can spend the day without, like, having my head in the toilet constantly. But yeah, so we got pregnant with Allie. At this point, we obviously, with all these kids, we were not in our single wide trailer anymore.
Oh, you had moved.
We
Okay.
had moved. Yeah, so our single wide trailer was actually on a farm that we were kind of like not sharecropping, but kind of sharecropping. So we worked on the farm. My husband worked on all of their equipment, and I did the chores for the animals, and they let us live in the trailer on the property for free while we got out of debt.
Wow, that's amazing.
And so it was a really big blessing. We had like they were going to tear the trailer down, and we're like, wait, how bad is it? Like, um, because we were not in a position to buy, and Easton was like a year old. But yeah, so we lived there while we got out of debt, and the Lord made a way for us to get a down payment for our house, and we bought a house on 2 acres where we live now. And yeah, so we were planning our home birth, our second home birth, our first home birth in our home that we owned. And my in-laws actually ended up moving into the single wide trailer.
Oh, wow.
So Mama and Papa live where Everly was born.
That's so cool. Are they close by?
Yeah, it's about 15-20 minutes down the road, but
Yeah, that's
not
close.
too bad. Um, yeah, so we were planning our first home birth in our new home, and we had Riley with us. She moved out during that period of time, that winter.
So she wasn't there for the birth?
She was not. She was out of foster care. We had guardianship of her, and she had a relative in Minnesota, a great grandfather, I think. But her grandma went up there to take care of him, and she went with grandma to help. And so she was up there, and she missed the birth, but she was really excited to be up there. And then she came home, and when she came home, she got her own place. But yeah, so she still like we have pictures of her holding Allie when she was a newborn and all that, but she wasn't here for the birth, like she had planned to be. She was going to be our photographer.
Oh,
But my labor with Allie started almost exactly how it was with Everly. I woke up at 6 o'clock on the dot. I was in the kitchen and making some toast for breakfast, and I remember I had my hand on my back, and I didn't even like register that I was having contractions, but as soon as I said it out loud, I was like, "Man, my back is hurting something fierce." And as soon as I said it out loud, I was like, "Oh, I'm in labor.
mm.
These are my contractions." Yeah, so we're doing this again. And we called our whole birth team. We had a doula specifically for our big kids so they could be there as much as they were comfortable. So if they got too uncomfortable, she could gauge that and take them out of the room. We had a movie and snacks set up for them in their room. And they just wanted to be out where the action was. Like they were waiting. And of course, again, my husband is in control of the pool, trying to get the pool filled. It was pretty much a replay of Everly's birth, except for she wasn't posterior, so it wasn't too intense this time. And the kids, I remember them peeking their head out the hallway. They're like, "Can we come out now?" And Matthew's like, "Just wait till she gets in the pool. Wait till she gets in the pool." So they finally got the pool ready, and I got in and I hit transition as soon as I got in the water. The kids came out, and I had like these probably like 5 minutes, maybe longer, where I just had like this break. My midwife, she's like, "I think you hit transition like as soon as you got in the water because you had like this kind of peaceful moment, and I was able to talk to the kids, and they were holding my hands, splashing in the water a little bit, and I was like, hey, mommy's making crazy, crazy sounds, and it sounds like a wild animal." I said, "But that's just my body working so hard to bring the baby here." And I said, "God's given me lots of power and lots of strength to get the baby here. And so that's what those sounds mean." And they're like, "Okay." That was totally fine. That was like enough information for them. They're like, "Yeah, okay." And so we have pictures of me pushing, and the kids are like peeking over the side of the birth pool, like right there in the action, seeing what was happening. And Mary, our doula, with this one, she's like, they didn't even like bat an eye. Like there was no point where they were uncomfortable or didn't want to be there or like looked like they were gonna pass out or anything. Because I thought for sure Easton would be a little bit too squeamish. but he was awesome. Yeah, and so they were there for the whole thing. Matthew, like, once when I was getting out of the pool after Allie was born, I handed Allie to Matthew, and there's a picture of him, like, reaching for her, and Everly is between his legs, like, just standing there between his legs, like, looking up, like, "This is so cool." So she was almost 2, and Easton was almost 5 when Allie was born,
Hmm.
and they did fantastic. It was a really quick and, I don't wanna say easy labor, but it was a really quick and seamless labor. Everything progressed really nicely. I had my back labor again, and I was able to get in the pool to push, but no complications, no issues, no tearing. And I even talked to Easton a few weeks after Everly was born. Someone got a cut on their knee or something, and he's like, "Oh, I do not want to see blood because blood makes me go, ugh." And I was like, "Easton, you just watched your sister be born." I was like, "There was blood when Allie was born." And he's like, "Yeah, but that blood wasn't scary because I knew you weren't in danger or hurt."
Oh.
And I was like, "That's really sweet." But he's like, "That blood isn't scary. That blood doesn't bother me because I know you're not in danger and you're not hurt." And I'm like, "Okay." So it was really sweet. They all climbed into bed with us for that first, like, golden hour, and then got their clothes on, got dressed, and went outside and played. And it was just a regular, ordinary day for them. They just had a baby sister in the morning.
Well, and that's nice too that, like, you got a full night's sleep and then you woke
Yeah.
up and a few hours later, here was your baby. So you were
Yep.
like, you were probably fine too.
It was great. And it was the same situation with Everly. Like, I started labor around 6 a.m. Everly was born right before noon, 11:59. And with Allie, it was 6 a.m. again, and then she was born at 10,
Wow.
like 9:55 or something like right around 10 o'clock. And so we just had the rest of our day, and we were well rested. And
That's awesome.
yeah, so I'm hoping to go into labor early in the morning again
And this
because,
time you'll have her by 8.
yeah, and that'll be perfect because I'm hoping we can have the birth outside in the garden.
Oh, in the morning light.
It won't be too miserably hot by then.
Right.
But,
Because you're due in September?
September 1st, yeah.
Nice.
Yep, we got a little less than a month now. But,
And you've gone around 40 weeks for all of them.
yes, Easton was born 30 minutes past his due date. Everly was born 12 hours before her due date. And Allison was 4 days past her due date, but she also had a 36-inch long umbilical cord. And so it was, like, freakishly long umbilical cord, and we're pretty sure she was, like, 'cause when she came out, she was all wrapped up in it.
Yeah.
So we're pretty sure she was just kinda suspended there and not descending like she would have,
Otherwise.
otherwise. Yeah,
Yeah.
so we think that was kind of a fluke, why she was overdue. But, yeah, so I'm really holding loosely with the plans with this one because if I can labor in the water, that would be great.
Hmm.
If I can't, that's okay too. If I have a land birth, I want it to be outside. Like, I planted
Yeah.
a ton of flowers in the garden because I knew I wasn't gonna be gardening this summer.
Hmm.
And so I planted a ton of wildflowers, and I was like, "Let's have a baby out here."
Well, that's awesome.
But, we also have a plan for the living room too. So I'm just kinda going with the flow this time around and
Yeah.
just gonna accept whatever the Lord has for us.
Well, thank you for sharing everything. And if you're up for it, we'd love to hear your next birth story when you come back. And we'd also love to hear your adoption story too, because we
Yes.
know you have a fourth. And that journey, I know, is entirely different than, biological pregnancy. So,
It has been so different. I think it's a lot different too because she does have disabilities, and so I've had to really humble myself with, being this natural-minded mama to a medical mama.
yeah,
It's
I
been
bet.
it's been a big journey, but yeah, I'm happy to share it. Thanks for having me on here.
Yeah, thank you. And I will look forward to having you back, and we wish you the best of luck with your pregnancy and your delivery.
Thank you. We're getting close.
Yep, almost there. Thanks again for joining us today. Be sure not to miss an episode by hitting subscribe. Also, we'd love for you to leave a review of the show so that more people like you can hear more stories like these. If you're local to the Triad of North Carolina and seeking childbirth classes, birth consultations, or a birth doula, please click on the link in the show notes to take you to our website for more information. Just as a reminder, this show is not giving medical advice, so please continue to see your personal care provider as needs arise. Also, if you would like to be a guest on the Surrendered Birth Stories podcast, please click the link in the episode show notes to get in touch with me. We hope you have a great week, and remember, learn all that you can, make the best plans, and then leave it in God's hands.